If you want to learn about the basics of EU AI Act, then this video is for you. So I'll explain some key facts about this act. Also, I'll show you what are the main requirements, including the requirements for high-risk AI systems. I'll also show you how this EU AI Act is enforced. And finally, I'll show you how it is related to other frameworks like ISO 42001, EU GDPR, and also NIS2. And I'll also show you where to find a course that will teach you how to implement AI governance, which is needed according to this EU AI Act. So after you watch this video, you'll have a clear idea on where to start with your compliance process for this act. Okay, let's start first with some key things. So first of all, EU AI Act was published in 2024, and basically it is important for at least three reasons. The first one is if this new technology is not regulated, then it could have big negative impacts on individuals or society as a whole. So basically the main purpose of this act is really to reduce these risks. Second, this act is a regulation. This means that it applies directly to companies in any EU country, which means that these EU countries do not have to publish their own AI laws and regulations. And in this regards, EU AI Act is very similar to EU GDPR. And the third thing is that EU AI Act is the first major AI regulation worldwide, which means that probably other countries out of Europe will also publish similar laws and regulations that are kind of based on EU AI Act. And again, similar thing has happened with the GDPR. Lots of countries have published their own privacy laws, which are very similar to GDPR. Now, who must comply with this act? And all the companies that develop or sell AI systems must comply with it, but also all the companies that use AI systems must also comply with it, which means basically it's irrelevant almost to any company in Europe because most of the companies now at least use AI systems. Now, before you start worrying, if you're only using AI systems, you'll notice that a large majority of this EU AI Act is not relevant for companies that are only using AI systems. It's more relevant for the ones that are developing them and selling them. But I'll explain these details later on throughout this video. And just also to mention, it doesn't matter whether a company is based in European Union or not. But if it is based in the United States and if it sells AI systems towards European countries, then this company also needs to comply with EU AI Act. Now, this act actually defines a couple of roles when it comes to AI systems. So the first one is AI provider. And this is really a company that develops AI systems or actually hires someone else to develop AI systems and then places those AI systems on the market under their own brand. And then there are AI deployers. Basically, these are the companies that use AI systems in their operations. And then there are AI importers. And basically, these are the companies that import particular AI systems that are provided by AI providers in non-European countries. So basically these AI importers are importing actually these AI systems into the EU market. And then there are AI distributors, and basically these are the companies in the supply chain that sell these AI systems in the EU markets if they have not been already categorized as AI providers or AI importers. And then EU AI Act also mentions AI operators, and basically this means any of these companies that I mentioned earlier, any of them can be AI operator. Now this EU AI Act is structured in 13 chapters, and it has 113 articles, and there are 13 annexes to this act. It's kind of funny, I'm not sure if this was intentional, all of these 13s, but in any case, this is how it's organized. I'm not going to go into these chapters now, but in the description below, you'll find a link to the original text of EU AI Act, and then you can actually open it up and read it on your own. Okay, let's go now into the main requirements of this act. And one of the key things in this act is that there are different rules for different AI systems based on what kind of a risk they actually pose. And this is a little bit strange in this act because it mentions only high-risk AI systems. However, when you read the act through, then you will see that it actually differentiates between 4 levels of risk. First of all are these unacceptable risks. And even though the Act doesn't mention this particular term, in its Article 5 you actually have a list of prohibited activities that are not allowed according to this Act. This means that basically these systems pose these unacceptable risks. And then there are these high-risk AI systems, and they are specifically named as such. And as you will see later on through this video, that most of these requirements in the Act are actually related to these high-risk AI systems. And then the third category are these AI systems with a limited AI risk. And again, this term is not used in the Act, but actually these AI systems have very small, so to say, requirements. So by this fact, you can actually see that the Act doesn't consider these AI systems as high risk. And then the fourth category are basically the AI systems with no risk. And basically for those systems, there are no requirements. So probably this is a relief to all of these companies that develop these kind of systems. Now, let me mention briefly what are these prohibited AI activities. So, for example, these are the AI systems which would use vulnerabilities of individuals related to their age or maybe ethnicity, these kind of things. So this is prohibited, and basically there are 8 types of AI systems that are listed in the Act. And if you want to see these 8, you can actually click the link in the description of this video, and there you'll have a summary of all of these 8 types of AI systems. Now let's go to these high-risk AI systems, and if AI systems are used for any of these 8 areas, then they are considered high-risk AI systems. And these 8 areas are biometrics, critical infrastructure, educational and vocational training, employment, essential private services and essential public services, law enforcement, border control management and asylum, and finally administration of justice and democratic processes. Now, if you want to see an explanation of these categories, take a look at the Act itself, but let me now explain you what are the main requirements for these high risk systems. So there is a requirement to implement this risk management system, also to introduce AI governance, also to introduce data governance, then to produce technical documentation, to generate all kinds of records, to enable transparency and provide relevant information about the AI systems, to introduce human oversight over these AI systems, to ensure accuracy, robustness and cybersecurity. And there are also some other requirements, for example, quality management system, documentation keeping, automatically generated logs, and so on and so on. And later on, I'll actually present you this ISO 42001 standard, which actually can be very helpful to resolve all of these compliance requirements. Okay, now let's see what are these transparency obligations for these limited risk AI systems. And basically, the requirements there are very simple. The Act actually requires that the users of AI systems are notified that the content that they are seeing is actually AI generated or AI manipulated. And these transparency obligations are mandatory for AI systems that, let's say, generate video, audio, but also some other types of AI systems. And then there are different set of requirements for these general purpose AI models. And these general purpose AI models are not the same thing as these high risk AI systems. Rather, these general purpose AI models are the models actually that stand behind, for example, ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude. So these models may or may not be part of high risk AI systems, but in any case, the Act actually specifies several requirements on what these models actually have to comply with. And these requirements include, writing technical documentation, providing information throughout this supply chain, specify what the data was used for training, these kind of things. So to summarize these requirements, the biggest actually requirements are related to high-risk AI systems, but also to these general purpose AI models. Now let's briefly go through enforcement. So first of all, penalties. There are penalties of up to 35 million euros if a company provides these prohibited AI systems, and then there are some lower fines for other breaches of this Act. And when it comes to government bodies that are in charge of enforcing this EU AI Act, the Act specifies numerous government bodies, but the most important ones are these AI Office, which actually works works as part of EU Commission, and this AI office monitors the implementation of this EU AI Act and can actually impose some of these penalties. And then there is this European Artificial Intelligence Board, which basically coordinates activities between EU countries, but also issues various opinions on how the act needs to be implemented. And then there are also national competent authorities, so basically local government bodies that are in charge of enforcing this EU AI Act. Now let's see how EU AI Act is related to other frameworks. So first of all, EU GDPR. And actually the EU AI Act refers to GDPR in several of the articles and basically confirms that the companies that are using AI systems have to comply with the GDPR as well. In other words, when these AI systems process personal data, this personal data needs to be protected according to GDPR. Now, when it comes to NIS2, this is a European cybersecurity directive for critical infrastructure companies. First of all, EU AI Act specifies that any AI systems used for critical infrastructure are considered actually high-risk AI systems, and therefore they have this toughest actually a list of requirements that these companies need to implement. And besides, for any high-risk AI systems, the EU AI Act specifies that also there needs to be a cybersecurity protection. So obviously, from the perspective of this EU AI Act, there is an overlap between cybersecurity and AI governance. Now, ISO 42001 is an international standard for AI governance, and this standard is not really mentioned in EU AI Act. But when you actually take a look at these requirements for high-risk AI systems and for these general-purpose AI models, you see that there are lots of requirements, but there is no really explanation on how companies actually need to comply with all of these requirements. And this is where actually 42001 becomes very useful, because it provides a framework, it provides, let's say, a know-how how actually to do all of these things that are specified as requirements in EU AI Act. And I'll show you now where to find a free course where you can learn about ISO 42001. Okay, here you can see this ISO 42001 Foundations course from Advisera. And by the way, this course is actually free. You can go through all the lessons without any payment, and you would have to pay a fee only if you want to go for the certification exam. Now, here you can find some general information, but let's take a look at which lessons are included. So for example, here in Module 1, you actually have a lesson on how to write the documentation for AIMS. And basically AIMS is Artificial Intelligence Management System, or in other words, AI governance. Also some other general lessons on how to implement AI governance and so on. Also some more technical explanations about what are neural networks, what is machine learning, some basic terminology, AI systems lifecycle, and so on. Now in Module 2 and further, you will see the explanation of each and every clause from this standard. For example, how to write an AI policy, which is in clause 5.2, also what are the roles and responsibilities, 5.3 and so on. But let me actually show you this most interesting module. This is about risk management. And here you can actually learn how to create this risk management system, which is required for high-risk AI systems. So basically, what is the process, how to define the methodology, how to identify the risks, and so on and so forth. This is the whole module. And also what is interesting is this module 6, because it explains all the controls from Annex A of 42001. And here you can see even more details about how to write policies, how to organize your company, roles and responsibilities. Then here, how to assess the impact. Basically here, how to run actually the AI systems throughout their life cycle. Here, this is about data governance and so on. So lots of actually things that are very useful for EU AI Act. Okay, I hope this was helpful, and let me know in the comments below if you have any questions about this EU AI Act, and I'll respond as quick as I can. And to access this 42001 Foundations course that I was showing you, click the link in the description below, and you'll be able to open a free student account and actually go through all of these training videos without any fee. And you would have to pay only if you want to go for the certification exam. And see also my next video, which explains in a little bit more detail what AI governance is really about and what are the key, let's say, elements to implement this governance. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and you can also subscribe to my YouTube channel not to miss any of my new videos. and I publish videos about AI governance and cybersecurity governance every week. Thanks for watching.